You're listening to the Chris Vaughn Podcast, episode 13, What You Can Learn from an 8-Year-Old's Carnival. Passive income, entrepreneurial, getting life unstuck. Hey, this is Chris Vaughn. Hey, thanks for being with us. A couple things here. I've been having this thought. I have remembered this for some time, and I just got thinking, what are the takeaways? What are the things I took away in life from the podcast? Has kind of like three modes to get our lives unstuck, to live smarter or living smart, and then passive income, doing things that we can do to make passive income to increase our life, increase our ability, increase our scope of influence. Everybody, in my opinion, should have whatever you want to call it. Today, people call it a side hustle, a side job. I've always had 2-3 things going at one time. It seems like I can only really focus on one or two, but I've always had several different. Always have been asked by people to be a part of multi-level this and multi-level that, and some of them are great, and I like them and I like their products, but I'm not into. I'm just never been geared for that, and so I've never really very entrepreneurial. I've done so many things. Just as an aside, before I even get into the story of the 8-year-old carnival that me and my sister used to do. And we did it, I think, for 2 years, multiple times this summer when we needed money. Printed a yardage book for a golf course one time to buy a computer. I have done computer network jobs, websites, spoke at different events. Speaking's always been a part of my life. I've always done something, bought cars, sold cars, made things online, sold old time radio CDs. Still occasionally do that when somebody finds out that I used to do that, and I'll make the setup for them. It always seems like there's always a lot of opportunity, and a lot of people think today there's not a lot of opportunity. Now, when I was growing up, we weren't really poor, but money was always tight, so it was sometimes really tight. I've often joked when we were real little, my mom, she would pack a lunch. My mom was really good at stuff like this. She'd make us, sandwiches. We'd get in the car. We'd drive to the river, the Yadkin River. I can still see this place in my head. There was a rope swing. The water was probably 3-4 feet deep, and maybe in one spot, maybe 4.5. But that was way out. And so where we played was, 2-3 feet. We would play in the water, the hot summertime. And we would collect rocks. We'd go home and paint the rocks. Now, I would tell some kids that today and they laugh like, that's horrible. It was the best time. Yeah, I think sometimes growing up, if you got everything, you don't appreciate anything. Me and my sister, we loved going to the movies, but of course, sometimes we didn't have enough money or money would be tight that week. Sometimes we did and we'd go. But we would love to go to the drive-in, the King Drive-In, King, North Carolina. It's not there anymore. Man, those were great memories. But you could get in for like $5, but sometimes we didn't have the $5. So me and my sister got in them. So I don't know how many times we did this, maybe 5 times or 6 times in a couple years. We would do carnivals. We would make our own little games. We would, have little stations and run it in stations. And we would invite all of our neighborhood friends to come. And all the games cost like a quarter, or the big game maybe 50 cents. But most of the time it was a quarter or a nickel. And we would get some of our toys out there. And I remember they had a thing back then called hippity hops, and I don't even know how to describe it. It was this gigantic round rubber ball with a handle, and we'd have hippity hop races and give away prizes. I'm just telling you, it was, we never knew what to expect, but we also knew this. And so this is my first takeaway for you. You've got to start and try. And you should never look at it as a failure. Some of them were just kind of a bomb. We probably did it even more than 6 or 8 times. I can't even remember how many times. I know when we stopped, because that's another point, because we got scared. It got to where we would have a number of friends all from the neighborhood. They would come and they would, enjoy it. And Kool-Aid was cheap, and still like Kool-Aid. And so we would, serve Kool-Aid for refreshments. And of course, that was a nickel. They had to buy the refreshments. And it was hot, so we would sell Kool-Aid. We did this. We would make enough money to go to the movie. Sometimes we'd make enough to go to the movie, and what was funny is it was $5 a car, so my mom would let us bring all of our friends who had paid us to go to the movie. So it was great. Served us, served them. Everybody was happy. Great time. I remember I had a thing with the car, and we would time it to see if they could make the laps on this little toy thing. Races, rides, whatever rides we could. Do things with bicycles. We just tried to make it as fun as we could. And I look back on it, it was just a great experience. I'm 8 years old and 9 years old. And we worked at it, and it was just a great experience. Great experience at trying to be an entrepreneur. Great experience at trying to make something and do something. So the first thing you got to do if you want to get started, you got to start, and not only start, you can't be afraid. You know, I remember when me and my sister were making our little signs, Carnival Tuesday, 12 to 5, whatever it was. And, it's hand painted, it's finger paint we're using, and paint. My mom would help us make the signs, and we'd go put them in this little store down the street, and there were telephone poles. We lived in a great yard, this great yard. It was right on the corner of this main drag, and so we had friends here and friends a street over, and friends 4 or 5 houses, and 2 houses down, and some friends across the street. And so we would put it on the signs, and we would try to, build some buzz. But you can't be afraid. What if I try this and it fails? And what will people say? We didn't care. We just wanted to go to the movies. We wanted to, go to the drive-in. Drive-in did triple features, one after the other. I mean, and my mom would, we would stay and watch at least 2 of them. It was great. But you can't be afraid. If we'd have been afraid and never tried it, we'd have never gone to some of the movies, watched some of them and had great times, pop all of our own popcorn and sometimes bring our own drinks. And sometimes we would have enough money, we'd go get drinks. So, or it would have been a good week for my parents and they would have some extra money. Regardless, you have to start, but you don't need to be afraid. You look at it, we didn't have any Ferris wheels. We didn't have any bumper cars. Didn't have any of the big carnival things. We had what we had. And one of my big things in life, and I'm always so funny with this, I get tired of this with people. I've talked many times on here about my bullet journal, which I don't even really like calling it a bullet journal, but it's my planner. I write in it every day. I write my goals every day. I actually changed them around. It was 12. I actually made it 11 because 2 of them was actually almost the same thing, so I combined them. And I know people who will never take an $8 moleskin and do that. They're going to wait until they have a $50 planner system, or like I talked in a podcast and video not long ago, $135 a year, because that's listen, if you want to start and you're not afraid, you'll start with what you have. Years ago, a friend of mine would constantly say, and he would use this terminology, he was a minister, he'd say, I know the Lord wants me to write books. I just need a word processor. I need a good typewriter. This is before word processors come out. So, but they did have typewriters that you could type and, and correct various. So we got one of them. Well, then it was, I need a good word processor. I need a good laptop. Well, laptops back then, anyway. So he finally gets that. He's never written a book yet, still, that I know of. And I remember watching a TV person one day. And they asked him, they said, how do you write so many books? He goes, well, I just give myself several hours a day, or I think it was an hour and a half. He said, every morning I write for 90 minutes and blah, blah, blah. They said, how do you write it? With a typewriter? Do you dictate it? What? And he just holds this up. And it was a fountain pen. He goes, just this. He said, I always write longhand. If you want to write something, if you want to start something, you'll find the initiative to do it. So start. Set a time. Set a time to do something. And number 2, don't be afraid. Just get rid of that. The people who mock you love you when you are successful. The friends who made fun of us wanted to go to the movies when we could pay for it. Hey, number 3, advertise it. Let people know. That's what we were doing with our little signs. That, and again, we would put them in these little stores. We'd even go sometimes down to downtown and hang them up and stuff, and so people could see it. You got to let people know. And in the day we live with this thing in our hand, and Facebook and Instagram and Facebook ads and Instagram ads and YouTube like this video's on, there are so many options out there to let people know. And you can find your niche. But you can't be afraid, but you have to start. Now here's my 4th one. Every time I think of this, I laugh. You just need to go for it, and whatever happens, happens on some of it. And by that I mean most of the time we have all these expectations, and it's not what actually happens. So we had been doing these little carnivals maybe 2 years, a couple times during the summer when we're out of school, go to the movies 2-3 times a year or something. And I kept saying 8 or 9, it may have been 10, 9 or 10. But I remember me and my sister, we're sitting in our house one day, and we got a carnival coming up this day. And so, we've got great hopes. We're gonna make some money. We're going to the movies. It's gonna be great. We'll split the money, and it's gonna be a great time. All of a sudden, a car, I mean, full of people, pulls up in front of our house on this, and again, it's a very highly traveled road even back then. And they pull over and they jump out, just real country. Where's the carnival? They were yelling out and stuff. And me and my sister, we run inside and hide. We had no idea. You know what? They expected Ferris wheels and bumper cars and all the games. We had no idea what to expect. And that's the other part that's so good. You know, I've often wondered if we had kept trying it. And it was really not long after that, my mom and dad separated. And so where we lived, we moved. But I've often wondered if we could have made it even something more. But we had people, because this, and again, these signs were written by 10 and 12-year-old kids. I mean, it's not like it's a printed flyer, you know, circus, you know, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Baylor, the Clyde Brothers. No, it says carnival, rides, drinks, you know, something, free admission. All you had to do to free admission was walk on the property. I mean, you know, we had no idea what to expect. And I promise you, you don't either. You may do 50 videos and none of them hit, and then you do one and it's just magic. You may do 1,000 podcasts, it seems like, or write 10 books. How many people have I ever met who have written stuff and written stuff and written stuff and written stuff, and then they have one hit, it seems. So don't let what to expect. Expect the best. Because I promise you, even if you expect the worst, it probably won't be as bad as you think. It probably will not be as big as you think. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but you never know. And so I put in my notes here, never know what to expect because the actuality is always different from your expectation. And it really is. Most of the time, I believe it's always better than your expectation because many times we're just so demeaning to ourselves. And lastly, it's always worth the effort. You know, I wouldn't take anything for some of the memories of me and my sister doing these carnivals. I think we called them fairs. Maybe we called it a fair. Maybe that was a problem with that family that pulled up, just raucously wanting to know where this Ferris wheel was. But it's always worth the effort. You know, I made the comment earlier starting out, like some of the things I've done to survive and thrive. And one of them was I talked a golf course into letting me print a yardage book. Now, a yardage book's a little book for the golf player, you know, for the players, and it'll tell them how far the distance from certain locations. And if you ever watch a professional tournament, you'll see the guys, they'll pull it out of their back pocket. Well, now with GPS apps and those range finders, you don't really need them anymore as much. But nobody had them back then. This was in the early 90s. And so I sold a golf course locally on buying a yardage book. I'd never done one. I'd never even printed one. But I found a printer and had priced it out and figured a way to price it cheap enough, and printed a couple thousand of them and sold them. And it was a lot of work. Oh my gosh, it was much more work than I expected. And I decided after that one that my yardage book business, and it was called Golf Resources, that it was gone. I'm not doing it anymore. It's just too much work for the return. But it was worth it. It was worth the experience. It's worth the challenge. So no matter what you're chasing or what you're doing, go for it. If it's an 8-year-old carnival or a 9-year-old's carnival or fair, do it. Go for it. Enjoy it, because I promise you, down the road, you will have great, not only memories, but takeaways. I'll give you a good takeaway and then I'll close. One of them, when I was shooting the yardage book, integrity means everything. On every level. So I'm shooting the yardage book. Well, usually the yardage book is shot from so far in, you know, like it's 150 here, 200 to the green. And if you play golf, you understand. If you don't worry about it. But the yardage from the tee to the green, meaning from where you start to end, you know, it's supposed to be what the book says, what they advertise. And so they asked me when I started, I had only agreed to shoot from 200 in, meaning from certain points on the course in. They said, if you will, shoot the tee boxes too for us. And I thought, you know, just to be good, I said, okay, I'd be glad to. There was not a hole on that entire golf course that was in the regulation of what they advertised. Nothing. And it was funny to me because, and I took this away from it. I don't know how many golfers I've met, and they'll say, well, I can drive the ball at this course specifically. I can drive the ball 275 yards. Well, what they didn't know was that hole is 50 yards short. It wasn't what it said it was. So they were only hitting it 225 yards. Integrity matters everything. And that takeaway, if that's the only thing I ever got, other than the computer I bought with the money, which is an expensive computer to do that job, but it bought my first computer, and the golf I got to play out of it. If that's all I got, that was well worth it. It's always worth the effort. Don't look at the failure. Don't look at whether you do it and stop it as something. It was worth that. I didn't quit. Found something else, stayed at it. So whether you're starting a carnival for your 8-year-old or whether you're encouraging your child to be an entrepreneur, remember, tell them to start. Tell them to not be afraid. Advertise the hound out of it. Have some great expectations, but don't be caught off guard if it's not exactly what you thought. And always remember it's worth it. And hey, we'll see you next week. Hey, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to encourage you, if you will, take a moment and subscribe. And also click the bell. That way you'll always be updated whenever we release a new video. So take a moment, subscribe, hit the bell. We'll see you next time.